Hello, this is one of the 200 talks that I'm recording on the history of Western art. They're divided into sections, and this is section 10 on the Renaissance, episode 3 on Piero della Francesca. He is one of the most important artists of the early Italian Renaissance. So let's find out more about him. This is a portrait of Piero from Giorgio Vasari's The Lives of Artists, but it was produced many years after he's died. There is a tradition that this painting of a Roman soldier from Piero's resurrection is a self-portrait, but unfortunately there's no hard evidence that that is true. What we do know is he was born in Borgo Santo Sepolcro in Tuscany around 1415. His father was a merchant, and in 1439, at the age of 24, he began an artistic career as an apprentice to Domenico Veneziano in Florence. Then 6 years later he returned to his hometown, as he had been awarded a prestigious commission to paint the altarpiece of the Polyptych of the Misericordia. That work took him some 17 years to complete, and it incorporates all of his ideas, as we shall see, on perspective, light and colour. 7 years after that, he began work on his most significant fresco cycle, The Legend of the True Cross, in Arezzo, and he completed that some 14 years later. Then around 1460, he painted one of his most enigmatic paintings, The Flagellation of Christ, that we'll discuss later. In 1472, he completed the Brera Madonna, also called the Montefeltro altarpiece, in his mature style. The painting is notable for the enigmatic egg suspended above the Virgin Mary. He died in 1492 in his hometown of Sansepolcro at the age of 77, and he leaves behind a legacy of groundbreaking artworks that combine mathematical precision with poetic beauty. Now, he wrote treatises on perspective and geometry, and they continued to influence artists and mathematicians throughout the Renaissance, and that and his art consolidated his reputation as one of the most important figures of the early Renaissance. So let's start with one of his very well-known works in the National Gallery, London, The Baptism of Christ. An early work commissioned for a church in his hometown, shows his mastery of spatial composition, and we see the central figure of Christ flanked by John the Baptist and a trio of angels, all positioned along a vertical axis, showing his adept use of linear perspective. The dove above signifies the Holy Spirit, the tree alludes to the crucifixion, and the serene landscape is reminiscent of classical statuary. Now, by 1448, when he started this, he'd returned to Sansepolcro, and having collaborated with his master Domenico Veneziano in 1439 on frescoes in Florence, he was appointed to the town council on his return, and I think that reflects his civic engagement and his prestige within the town. And that's when he probably painted this work. It's influenced by Masaccio and Alberti, who he encountered in Florence. There's various stories associated with his life. For example, around this one, it seems that while he was out in the Tuscan countryside making sketches for this work, he fell over some livestock that ran in front of him. Additionally, he is said to have argued about the placement of the altarpiece with the ecclesiastical authorities because he wanted to ensure maximum visibility. There's another anecdote. It seems that one of the angels has the face of one onlooker who persisted in coming and standing there for long periods, so he thought he'd incorporate him into the painting. Now, this is a portrait of Sigismondo Pandolfo Malatesta, painted in 1451. He was the ruler of Rimini. It's one of his Piero's rare secular works. We'll see another later. And it's a masterpiece of Renaissance portraiture. It's shown Sigismondo in profile. One of the reasons for that, and many artists use this standard format for portraits, it's reminiscent of ancient Roman coins. So it lends a sense of this timelessness and authority to the subject. You can see his aquiline nose, determined expression, and Piero's skill at capturing likeness. He probably painted it while he was working on the frescoes, and it's unusual. It shows the growing interest during the Renaissance in individual personality. Prior to that, portraits, except for incorporation of the likeness of a patron in a portrait, individual portraits like this were unknown or extremely rare. And it was at this time, this is one of the early revivals of the art of portraiture. He was gaining further recognition, and that is shown by him securing commissions from powerful patrons like this one. He was known, Sigismondo was known for his volatile temper, and he was at first displeased with this portrait. He found it too severe. However, when he saw how it intimidated his rivals, he grew to appreciate Piero's unflinching depiction. This is, it's not in such good condition, but this is Sigismondo Pandolfo Malatesta again, in this time praying in front of Saint Sigismund, painted for the Tempio Malatestiano in Rimini. It's a masterpiece of perspective, although it's a bit difficult to appreciate because it's in poor condition, but note the architectural setting and the sense of depth and grandeur. The figures are rendered with a solidity and presence, and that would become a hallmark of Piero's style. It's rich in symbolism. The two greyhounds, for instance, represent fidelity and nobility. The castle in the background is probably a reference to Sigismondo's military prowess, and there's a contrast between the earthly ruler and the heavenly saint, subtly emphasised through their position. The saint is higher, and their attire, and the fact that the saint is sitting looking down at Sigismondo. Now, as I said, this work he did for Sigismondo in Rimini indicates that his reputation was spreading across Italy, and this work raised his profile considerably. He was so pleased, Sigismondo was so pleased with this fresco that he gave Piero a gift of one of his prized hunting falcons. I must say, much to the bemusement of the artist, as he had little interest in hunting. It was about this time, when he was in Rimini, that he probably met the architect and theorist Leon Battista Alberti, who was redesigning the Tempio Malatestiano at this time. It's said, another humorous anecdote is that when Piero was working on this fresco, he became so engrossed in perfecting Sigismondo's likeness that he failed to notice the ruler entering the Tempio, and Sigismondo was so amused by how concentrated the artist was that it's reported that he stood quietly for an hour, allowing Piero to work undisturbed. This is the Barci chapel in the Basilica of San Francesco in Arezzo, and we see, I'll first draw your attention to the cross. It predates Piero's frescoes by about 170 years. It was made about 1280 to 1290 by an Umbrian artist known as the Master of St. Francis. And I draw your attention to it because, in a sense, it's the centre point, and Piero's frescoes in the chapel tell the story of the cross before and after the crucifixion. He began work on these frescoes in 1452, and they were to become his magnum opus, that is his best work. The fresco cycle is known as the Legend of the True Cross, and he completed it in 1466, demonstrating his mastery of perspective, use of light to create volume, and his ability to create these harmonious and serene compositions. Now, the fresco cycle tells the story of the True Cross, which is based on a work by Jacopus di Foragine, who was an Italian chronicler and Archbishop of Genoa in the 13th century. He wrote this legend, which spans from the time of Adam to the 7th century, explaining the history of the cross and placing it at the centre of human history. Let me put up a explanation of the sequence, and you can see how they're arranged. I'll take you through them. First of all, it's top right, labelled 1, and it starts with the death and burial of Adam. I'll show you this in more detail in a moment, but it's the tree that grew on Adam's grave supplied the wood for the cross. Number 2, which is below it, is the adoration of the sacred wood and meeting between Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. It was Solomon who ordered the tree to be cut down to build the Temple of Jerusalem, but finding the wood wasn't suitable, he used it to build a bridge. Then 3 is the burial of the wood of the cross on Solomon's orders, because he'd been warned by the Queen of Sheba that the wood would cause suffering for the Jewish people. He had the cross buried. Then 4, beneath it, is much later Constantine's dream. He dreams the true cross, or the cross will enable him to win in battle. And then 5 is the battle, Constantine's victory over Maxentius. He carries the cross into battle for the first time and wins the battle, and converts the Roman Empire to Christianity. 6, which is the sequence on the left, and it's on the top right. You can see it labelled 6. torture of the Jew. He, as I said, Constantine is converted to Christianity and sends his mother, Helena, to find the true cross. And she is shown here torturing a Jew in order to find the location of where the cross is buried. Then 7 to the left is the finding and recognition of the true cross. Helena and her court find the site of the cross. It's under a temple to Venus, and we see a dead young man being brought back to life by the power of the cross. Then 8 later, the battle of Heraclitus against Corres, defeating the pagan king who had stolen the cross. 9, the exaltation of the cross, and 9 is at the top. Heraclitus recovers the true cross. And then finally 10 is an annunciation, the angel Gabriel giving a palm, a symbol of victory, to Mary. It seems from the evidence we have that Sigismondo urged Piero to hasten the work. Piero always took a long time to deliberate over spatial accuracy. And at one point, a local youth is reportedly said to have defaced the wet plaster. Remember, these are frescoes. And Piero retained as an intentional artifact that imperfection. So although he works to achieve perfection and accuracy, things that happen he is willing to incorporate in the work. Let me move on and show you one of the works from the True Cross. It's the death and burial of Adam, and it's in 3 parts, like many of the scenes. It starts on the right, and we see Adam sending his son Seth to the gates of heaven to try to obtain a cure for his illness. And then we can see just to the right of the tree in the background an angel, an archangel, Archangel Michael, talking to Seth and giving him a branch that will grow into the tree used to make the cross. And we can see on the left mourners gathered around the burial of Adam. He's just being buried, and his son is planting the branch into the ground above the burial, and the branch will grow into the tree. And I've selected Adoration of the Sacred Wood and Meeting between Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. So we moved on to the time of King Solomon, and Solomon has ordered the tree to be cut down and used to help in the building of the Temple of Jerusalem, but the wood turns out to be unsuitable and is used to build a bridge initially. And so on the left we see the Queen of Sheba arriving with her entourage, and she senses the holiness of the wood, and you can see her kneeling to pray in front of the wood. And on the right she's being welcomed by Solomon, bowing in homage and telling Solomon of the prophecy about the future use of the wood. We zoom forward in time. This is Constantine asleep in his tent, dreaming that an angel comes, and you can see the angel at the top, saying, "In this sign," that is the cross, "in this sign you will win." So Constantine decides to take the cross into battle and wins the battle. I was going to show you the battle, but the key parts of the fresco have been lost. But Constantine, as I said, wins the battle, and converts the Roman Empire to Christianity. So moving on to 6 to 8 CE, there's another battle. Now, the Persian king, Khosrow, has stolen the true cross and keeps it blasphemously next to his throne under the canopy you see on the right. You can see the true cross next to the throne. The Christian emperor, Heraclius, is expected to be defeated, but wins, as you see here, a crushing victory. The warriors, who are dressed in Roman costumes, are stabbing, piercing the enemy, who it seems almost defenceless except for their shields, in vain trying to protect themselves. The final episode is on the far right, where the Persian king is sentenced to death and the true cross is taken to Jerusalem. So it seems that Piero, who was known for his precise calculations and measurements, spent an entire day calculating the exact angle at which to paint one of the soldiers' lances in this battle. When his assistant suggested it didn't matter, Piero is alleged to have said, "In art, God is in the details." The whole cycle reflects the political and cultural climate at the time, and the emphasis on the true cross and the power aligns with a crusading spirit that, although it was centuries later, still lingered in the 15th century Italy. Moving on to 1460 is when Piero painted one of his most enigmatic and discussed works, the Flagellation of Christ. It's a small tempera painting, now in the Galleria Nazionale delle Marche in Urbino, and it shows his mastery of perspective and his ability to create mystery and contemplation. It's puzzled art historians for centuries. It's in two distinct parts, the foreground with the three figures in contemporary dress and the background depicting the flagellation of Christ. A lot of the puzzlement is over the identity of the three figures in the foreground. It's been much debated. Some suggest they are contemporary political figures. One suggestion, there are many suggestions. One is that the central figure is the Duke of Urbino with his advisors, or an alternative, it's an angel flanked by representatives of the Latin and Greek churches. At the back, the seated man could be a political reference to the Byzantine emperor, and the flagellation could represent the pains of Constantinople. It could be the three men represent the present and the flagellation in the background the past, or it's been suggested the three men represent the past, present and future, and so all of these theories go on. And it's the ambiguity of the painting has partly added to its allure. He was at this point working for the court of Urbino under Federico da Montefeltro, and it was a very intellectual atmosphere in the court at that time, and that maybe influenced the complex symbolism and philosophical undertones of this work. One amusing story relates to when he first unveiled this painting. The court fell silent. They were unsure how to interpret its complex composition. Federico da Montefeltro, known for his wit, is reported to have broke the silence by saying, "Well, Piero, you certainly have given us something to talk about for the next century." Little did he know the discussion would continue for many, many centuries to come. This is Piero's Polyptych of the Misericordia, and it's a masterpiece of the early Renaissance, commissioned in 1445 by the Compagnia della Misericordia, which was a co-fraternity in his hometown. It's about 3 meters in height, and it's now in the Museo Civico di Sansepolcro. It took him 17 years to complete. It's multiple panels, and the centerpiece, which I'll expand, shows the Madonna della Misericordia, and it shows the Virgin Mary extending her protective mantle over kneeling supplicants, symbolizing her role as a merciful protector. So he's showing his ability to blend traditional iconography with innovative Renaissance techniques. Madonna is portrayed larger than human figures, which is a medieval convention, yet she is shown with a 3-dimensional rendering, and the use of perspective reflects the new artistic ideals of the time. The background in gold is was requested by the patrons, but Piero has cleverly integrated it with the 3-dimensional space created by the Madonna's mantle. The polyptych itself includes various saints which were significant to his hometown and to the co-fraternity. There's, as you can see, there's John the Baptist on the left, to his left Saint Sebastian and Bernardine, and the predella below shows scenes from the life of Jesus Christ, although the scenes below were mostly executed by his assistants. The Resurrection, painted around 1465, is one of his most iconic and another of his best-known works. It's now in the museum at Sansepolcro. It depicts Christ rising from his tomb surrounded by sleeping soldiers. It shows Piero's ability to combine religious symbolism with his understanding of perspective and human anatomy. The figure of Christ dominates, stands with his foot on the tomb, one foot still inside, showing his transition from death to life. The soldiers are still asleep, and as I said previously, the one to the left of Christ is thought by many to be a self-portrait of Piero. The landscape is the Tuscan countryside around the town, and you can see on the left the countryside is stark and bare, and on the right it's there's a lot more vegetation, again showing this transition from death to life. It was at this time that, or around this time, that Piero was at the height of his career, and he was known throughout the courts of Italy and receiving a lot of commissions. This commission was a significant honour because it was to be placed in the town's civic centre. Interesting anecdote, much later during World War II, The British artillery officer Tony Clark refused or refrained from shelling Sansepolcro because he remembered reading that Aldous Huxley had described the resurrection as the greatest painting in the world. And it was this decision, going against orders, that saved the fresco and the town, and in fact earned Tony Clark the honorary citizenship of Sansepolcro. This is Madonna del Parto. It's unique in depicting the pregnant Virgin Mary. And it stands out, I think, for its intimate and human portrayal of the divine. She's shown inside a tent. She's wearing a blue robe parted to reveal her swollen belly. There are two angels holding open the tent curtains, creating the sense of revelation. The fresco is in Monterci, and that town was the birthplace of Piero's mother, and it's said that he painted it partly as a tribute to his mother, adding a sort of personal dimension to this religious subject. There's an sort of amusing story that during restoration in the 20th century, conservators discovered a small sketch of a chicken on the back of the fresco, and some speculate that Piero, known for his humour, left this as a sort of a playful signature. In 1466, Piero completed this fresco of St. Mary Magdalene in the Arezzo Cathedral. It shows his ability to create monumental statuesque figures that seem to exist in a sort of timeless space. She has a serene expression, a classical pose, showing his ability to combine Christian iconography with Renaissance ideals of beauty. Now this particular work by Piero was relatively obscure for a long period. It didn't enjoy the same attention that his other works obtained, but modern critics have recognised it as one of the most fascinating and technically refined representations of the female figure in the early Renaissance. She is shown in a niche. She's elongated and imposing. She holds her attribute, which is a jar of ointment, referring to the time when she anointed Christ's feet. And the drapery is rendered with his characteristic attention to geometric form and volume, and his mastery of light, which creates this sort of sense of three-dimensionality and presence. One interesting anecdote: when the fresco was being restored in the 20th century, the conservators discovered sketches underneath the paint layer, and it's those sketches that give us a much bigger insight into his working process. In 1467, he began work on this polyptych of St. Anthony for the church of Sant Antonio in Perugia. It's a complex altarpiece. He completed it 2 years later, and it shows his ability to work within the traditional formats, but he's added his own style of monumental figures and harmonious composition. And it's a masterpiece of his mature period. The central panel depicts the Madonna and Child, and she is surrounded by saints: Anthony of Padua, John the Baptist, Francis, and Elizabeth of Hungary, reading the saints from left to right. Again, it shows his mastery of colour and light. And as I mentioned earlier, at this time in his career, he was highly sought after for these types of religious commissions. Another anecdote, when he first delivered this polyptych, the monks were initially taken aback by the stern expression he'd given to Saint Anthony on the far left. However, they soon came to appreciate how this severity added to the saint's aura of spiritual authority, and were pleased by the way that he'd constructed the work. I said earlier that I'd come to another secular piece. This is portrait on the left of Battista Sforza, the Duchess of Urbino, and on the right her husband Federico da Montefeltro, and it shows his skill at portraiture and the innovative approach he takes. Again, the shown in profile, reminiscent of ancient Roman coins, giving a sense of timelessness and nobility. They have a landscape behind, which is a departure from traditional portraits, and that gives added depth and this expansive view of the composition, showing also the growing interest during the Renaissance in nature. By this time he was working for some of the most powerful patrons in Italy, and this commission from the court of Urbino reflects his high standing in the art world. It's interesting, there's another anecdote that when he was engaged in painting, sketching Battista Sforza, who was known for her intelligence and her education, she engaged Piero in a lengthy discussion about perspective and mathematics, and it's said that these conversations influenced Piero's theoretical writings on art. This is the Brera Madonna, also called the Montefeltro altarpiece, which he produced for Federico da Montefeltro, the Duke of Urbino, who you can see as the patron is kneeling in front of the Madonna and Christ child, the one in the armour. But what intrigues people, if you look above the Madonna, is the egg, the enigmatic egg suspended above her head, and it's been the subject of a lot of scholarly debate. She is surrounded by saints and angels. The composition, like all of Piero's compositions, is perfectly balanced and symmetrical around the central axis. The egg, believed to be an ostrich egg, has been interpreted by some as a symbol of the Immaculate Conception, by others as a reference to the patron's coat of arms. But when Federico first saw the painting, he was perplexed by the egg and asked Piero about its meaning, and it's said that he replied with a smile and said, "My lord, sometimes an egg is just an egg." I don't know whether it's true or not, but it does reflect his reputation for dry wit and his tendency to let his work speak for itself. This is the Madonna de Senigallia, one of his last known paintings. I'll be showing you one more of his works. This is in the National Gallery in Urbino, and it again shows his mastery of light, creating this intimate image of the Virgin with Christ child, flanked by two angels. A powerful yet simple composition, arranged in a triangular form. The soft diffused light seems to emanate from within the painting. Excuse me. And the play of light on the faces and draperies shows his skill in rendering volume and texture. When the painting was rediscovered in the 19th century, it was found to be used as a notice board in a small church in Senigallia. The parishioners, who were completely unaware of the artist or its value, had been pinning announcements onto this masterpiece for years. The final work I'm going to show you is again in the National Gallery. I started with a work in the National Gallery. This is the Nativity, one of his later works. We're not sure exactly when he painted it, but it does show his mature style. It's depicting the birth of Jesus. It's a serene, contemplative atmosphere, carefully balanced, with the Jesus lying at the centre. And by this stage, he was given considerable freedom because he was so highly regarded. He was allowed to make many decisions in the structure, format of the compositions, the number of figures and so on. And this work reflects his deep understanding of religious symbolism. Amusing story was that he was so tied up in the work, became so absorbed in capturing the exact quality of light, that he worked through the night to capture the light perfectly by candlelight. But when dawn broke, he was reportedly disappointed to find that actual daylight didn't match the divine illumination he created. I'm not sure whether the story is true or whether he repainted the work or left it as the light he'd worked by all through the night. The landscape in the background is again inspired by Tuscan countryside, which would have added a touch of familiarity for him. And this was, as I said, one of his last works. He died on October the 12th, 1492, in his hometown at the age of 77, leaving behind a legacy of groundbreaking artwork combining mathematical precision with poetic beauty. And his perspectives and geometry treatises continued to influence artists and mathematicians. Well, that brings me to the end of this brief tour on Piero della Francesca, an artist and mathematician who always aimed for accuracy in the detail. As he said, God is in the detail. So thank you for your time and attention. And I will be recording the next in the series soon. I'm now about 2/3 through the roughly 200 talks that I plan to give in order to give a quick overview of the history of Western art. So thank you for now, and I'll see you again soon.